Let me tell you about Dream Girl. This is what I call her, as she has no apparent name, and I have not laid eyes on her for almost 10 years. Dream Girl has not laid eyes on me, ever, because she does not have any. In fact, she doesn't even have a face. As I was approaching my 30th year, I was frequently visited in those small hours of the night where I was most susceptible to those forces some people call fate, others call imagination, and some others call just dreams. Visited in my sleep by somebody who, while in my waking hours, I felt for precisely as I did in my dreams. The only difference being that while I was sleeping I knew who she was, and yet, during the day, although I could recall her and the moments we had shared, I was painfully aware of not knowing who she was, or even for that matter, what she fully looked like. What I do know is that she had a strong presence, and she also had my heart. This is the story of Dream Girl. She only ever came to me at night, which is to say, in my dreams. It was always after dark, always the night. Never have I seen her in the light of the sun. There was an old world feel to her, as I have seen worn down cobblestones beneath her feet as we walked together. But I get ahead of myself. I would say the best place to start would be our first meeting, my first dream. I have not a clue as to what I was wearing that evening, yet I can recall everything about her from that night. I was standing at a cart which was selling fruit. I noticed the wheel closest to me seemed to be in disrepair. It looked as if this cart had not been pulled for some years. The time was around 9 p.m, as I had heard bells a short while ago. An odd time, I would agree, for a fruiter to be out, but out he was, a short, portly gentleman of advancing years, friendly, with a big tuft of smooth hair gracing his top lip. It was cold on this night, and a thin misty fog was being gently pulled through the streets, a thick and thin, opaque sheet of cloud, tied to invisible strings, and being drawn through the town by the very moon itself. I could see soft lights glowing nearby, much like a gaslight of old, and dimly in the foggy distance, some obscured by trees in a park. The lights looked like the halos of angels resting in the trees, soft and almost palpable. These lights were not like the cold, sterile lights we see today to mark our roads and towns, to light our way in the dark. Now, don't get me wrong if this is beginning to sound like a dark and dangerous place. I am aware the words I choose to use can be construed as such, but I assure you that this is a story of happiness. This is the story of Dream Girl and I. And here she comes now. I had just purchased an apple from the cart man, which I find to be somewhat confusing, as I do not eat apples. And as I was handing him a small copper coin, I could sense a clear patch appearing in the fog from the corner of my left eye. I was transfixed, as if frozen by what I saw. Now, this was not a late time of night, as I have said. There were other people, couples mostly, going about their lives as people do, the fog and cold apparently commonplace. The hole in the fog seemed to purposefully maintain its character, slowly drifting, and within its borders there walked somebody, slow and graceful. The wide road was bare, compacted earth, but the walkway was paved heavily with big, slightly rounded, almost black stones. There was a slight grade to the road, and this person was slowly walking towards me. From a distance of about 200 yards, I could see that it was a female walking alone. A As she came near to where I stood rooted, apple in hand, I could see that she was shorter than I. She wore a full-length skirt, which caressed the ground by a thread, dark in colour, moving gracefully with her step, though it contained no folds. She also wore a dark shirt, tight-fitting, with no visible neckline, and a coat of similar colouring, plain for my position yet striking. She stopped 50 yards from me under one of those haloed lights, looking as if she were a part of the very ground itself, dark upon dark. The fog embraced her as if she were a wraith, or simply a figment of my imagination. Long seconds passed, and I realized I had been holding my breath. I blinked a long blink to wet dry eyes, and when I opened them, she was but 10 yards from me. Hair of a dark auburn sunset, the colour of the sky coruscates as it succumbs to the deep purple of full twilight when the stars come again to look down upon us. Her hair was worn past her shoulders and waved seductively at its ends. The coat she wore was a rich, woolen, dark brown, fitting close to her body, displaying discreetly embroidered flowers of a slightly lighter shade of brown, very well made. I thought it peculiar that she wore what I took to be a man's boots, yet they were perfect for her. Pale skin, much like the moon, looked good against her dark attire. I did not see her face on that night, and never was to, not once. Her face was always either in shadow or blank, as if an unpainted canvas. She took me by my accepting hand. She had come for me, and I know that I was meant to be there to meet this enigma of my mind. When she took my hand, I felt as though I had known and loved her for an age. The power she held over me was enchantment through and through. She held no malicious intent, no agenda. It is hard for me to convey the exact feeling I had, and time, thankfully, has not yet had the opportunity to dispel that feeling. It was akin to being whole, being in perfect harmony with your soul, if you can imagine that. I awoke with the lingering kiss of her scent in my mind. I knew then that the hours I had to endure each day, waiting to go back to her, would be intolerable. I also knew from that moment that I was hers and devoted to her, only I hadn't a clue as to what was to come in the approaching years. We never uttered a sound to each other. There was no need, as somehow I could see and feel her in my mind, along with all of my physical senses. We also never stopped being in physical contact, almost always by our hands, which I recall caused a rapture within me. We were both feeling the same emotions, I am sure, and I wonder these days what the cause of those emotions were. Did she have a power? From where had she come? And most importantly, where has she gone? Although I could not see her face, I did not wonder at this at any time. Only as I lay awake in the pre-dawn coolness of autumn, did I desperately force my foggy mind to recall any feature of her face. What would her eyes be like? How would her lips feel? The smooth skin of her cheek? And it sank upon me, a last flash of her before she was gone until she came for me again. I saw for a second her walking again to me standing at that fruit cart, and as she passed under one of those lights, I saw no shadows on her face, the kind that would be cast by eye ridges, or her nose, or lips. There was nothing but a whiteness, void of anything, framed by that hair. At this, I came fully awake, and she was gone, leaving me with a sickening feeling of loss. I thought that dreams were often obscure at best. Not actually seeing her face certainly doesn't mean there was none there to be seen, does it? I did not want to move, just stay where I lay and sleep again, hoping she was still there. Yet the real world was calling me, and I had to answer its commands. As the days went by, I found it difficult to function, always with Dream Girl in my mind, though I must say at this point that I did not call her that until several years later, reliving the night's experiences of walking with her through the streets and parks of that eternally dark old town. The town itself was not peculiar in any way. Actually, everything was always foggy and unclear. She led me everywhere, always looking towards me, looking at me, and there, in that place, as my dream self, I could sense her eyes penetrating me, although she had no eyes to see with. I was not to see her again for some time, and I awoke every morning crushed by her disappearance, finally starting to believe that maybe it meant nothing after all, until about 8 months later. She came to me, again in the same town, clad in the same attire, and we walked all night long through the fog once again, hand in hand. She smelled divine, intoxicating and sweet. A full moon passed completely over and began its dive into the horizon, and the sun began to make its presence known to me, attacking my mind's eye, telling me it was time to go. I held her to my chest, and I felt her full embrace for the first time, and it was all I could ever have wanted in the world. Daylight. There I was, lying awake, feeling so emotionally torn, knowing that she had come to me, the familiar wisp of fog dissipating from my memory and leaving for how long I could not know. I was deliriously happy that I had awoken to find her lingering near my soul, leaving her essence, a keepsake to protect until her return, all the while fearing that she again may not return for an age, or at all. To my utter surprise, the following night and the next 60 nights were spent with her, alone in my bed, wandering those now familiar streets and parks of this never-ending town of ours. Some passers-by began to recognize us and would say hello. Still I was unaware of her unusual appearance, as apparently was everyone else. I knew that I resided in this town, but was as yet to locate my home, nor seemed to want to. My love never gave an indication as to a destination. It would seem we shall always walk together, and this was fine by me. My waking life became a blur as I focused on Dream Girl. I found myself actually missing her company, knowing full well that it was nothing but dreams. But how could dreams produce such feelings? It surely isn't possible. One night, she did something completely unexpected. She put her arms around me, and as I responded in kind, looking down at her, I saw an emotion cross the milky blankness of her face. Or rather, I felt that emotion, somewhat like fear. This quickened my heart, wondering what she was thinking. She seemed so natural, simply the loveliest being ever to be created. Her hair, her neck, her pale skin, these features and her hands were all I ever could see of her due to her coat and skirt. She was always darkness in the night, always perfection. This feeling of fear I did not like, and wanted to run with her, yet she held fast, not yielding her hold on me. I gave no resistance. I felt safe in her arms and I felt loved. But why was there any fear at all? I did not see her the following evening, and having been together now for nights on end, I became worried when I awoke in the middle of the night, remembering her fear from the night before. I felt afraid for her. Something was wrong. After that, I was not to see her for almost 2 years, and had long given up hope of my enigmatic dream girl of ever returning to me. I began to look for her out in the real world. Maybe, I thought, she was walking towards me somewhere in the world, and whatever journey we are both on will bring us together in the universe, if it is meant to be. Asleep now, and she was waiting for me. I was at the old fruit cart once more, realizing I had not seen it since the long ago night we first met. Again she was standing under that light and did not move. When I saw her, I felt it as if I were aglow in her beauty, and that I were floating above the ground. We stood there, looking at each other, and the fog came once more towards her. I felt that fear again, when she was obscured and I began to shake. The fog moved on briefly, and she was no longer there. I had not taken my eyes from that spot. I turned, expecting to see her near me, as was her habit. The fruit cart was gone, as was she, the ghostly woman whom I loved. Looking down, there was the apple I had purchased from the kind man a lifetime ago, sitting by my feet. She had gone. I awoke to a dark and wet sky, laying there for an hour or more, committing everything about her to my mind. I hope she is on my path somewhere. I will know her when I see her for the first time. But will she know me? Dream girl, whoever you may be, this is for you.